Is this a joke? Commander ZVX squinted at the hologram, his tendrils twitching with confusion. You're telling me humans were the first warriors of the galaxy? The council chamber buzzed with skepticism. Around the vast circular table sat representatives from 15 of the galaxy's most advanced species, each one staring at the small hologram of a human soldier in ancient armor. A red dust floated around the figure, making its hardened expression seem almost threatening. The scientist beside ZVX cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles with one of his claws. There is no mistake, Commander. According to the evidence, humans were the origin of interstellar combat strategy. They developed warfare independently on their home world for thousands of years before ever contacting another species. They fought each other relentlessly. Several murmurs broke out, echoing through the chamber as the alien delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The concept was absurd. Humans were the last race admitted to the Galactic Concord. They were backward, barely crawling out of their solar system, when the rest of the galaxy was exploring nebulas and building Dyson spheres. Salvax tried to keep his voice steady, although something about the hologram's gaze seemed to penetrate his own. And what of their technology? Surely this warrior history didn't lead to advancements. The scientist gestured, and a new image appeared above the table. A human battlefield, thousands of years old. Metal weapons, crude explosives and war machines sprawled across the land. The soil was scarred, but beneath it, the foundations of a sophisticated strategy glimmered. On the contrary, the scientist said, humanity's technology advanced precisely because of their conflicts. Every technological leap was driven by warfare, armor, weaponry, tactics. They moved from throwing sharpened sticks to designing machines capable of destroying entire cities in just a few thousand cycles. A voice broke the silence, harsh and skeptical. If humans were so powerful, growled Yarok, the Zarnak representative, his spiny head quivering with disdain, why did they not dominate the galaxy ages ago? Why were they confined to that rock of theirs? The scientist hesitated. They were isolated. By the time they reached the stars, the rest of us were already here. But, he trailed off, his expression dimming. There is something else, an old tale from their culture, a story they tell to this day. They call it sleeping dragons. A shiver passed through the room, though none could explain why. ZVX's scales tightened. Explain this sleeping dragon. The scientist looked around, gauging the room before continuing. It's a belief that humans carry. The idea that power does not need to be displayed constantly. They are a patient species, but their history shows a capacity for ferocity that lies dormant until it's needed. They describe themselves as dangerous only when provoked, as if their nature waits coiled. Let me get this straight. ZVX tapped a clawed finger on the table, exasperated. They fought each other for millennia, wasted resources, even developed technology to enhance destruction, yet claimed to be peaceful. The scientist nodded. Yes. Their records show restraint. Their wars were devastating, but often they ended through negotiation, compromises. Humanity has long held a balance between warfare and diplomacy, perhaps out of necessity. After all, they fought among themselves long before they encountered any of us. Yarok sneered, his bony teeth glinting. So, we're to believe they're a race of deadly pacifists. Not pacifists, not quite. The scientist's voice dropped. It's something more controlled, a balance that other species don't practice, perhaps because they never needed to, and until now, humans had no one to fight but each other. At that, a new hologram appeared. It was a human soldier again, this time in modern armor. A sleek helmet with a visor reflected the room's dim light. Across his chest were strange symbols representing past battles or ranks, a tradition apparently passed down over centuries. ZVX watched the soldier's face with a frown. We're seeing this now. The scientist closed the hologram, leaving the chamber in silence. He spoke gravely. Because we've been monitoring them. We believed we could influence, perhaps control, their integration into the Galactic Concord by limiting their exposure to other worlds, by assigning them to non-combat roles. Salvax's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting they found out? Yes, the scientist admitted, and now we suspect they may retaliate. A low hum filled the room as the gravity of the statement settled over the council members. Retaliate? Such a notion was almost inconceivable among the galactic species who solved disputes with words, trade agreements, or arbitration. Retaliation, in the human sense, seemed almost barbaric, yet the evidence suggested humanity was more than capable of it. They could retaliate against us? Salvax's voice betrayed the first glimmer of doubt. He, like so many others, had seen humanity as a minor species, barely worth the resources spent managing their integration. The scientist looked down. They are no longer confined to Earth. Their ships are primitive but effective. Their soldiers are skilled, and they are resilient in ways we've never anticipated. Commander ZVX scoffed, trying to regain composure. Resilient? How? The scientist activated one final image. It was recent footage taken by a cloaked scout on Earth. The camera panned over a war zone where human soldiers moved with precise coordination. Even amid explosions and gunfire, they communicated in whispers, hand signals, and silent gestures. One soldier fell, only for another to pull him up and continue unbroken. The council members watched, unnerved, as a human soldier limped away from an explosion, wounded yet determined to keep going. They seem to have an unyielding will to continue, as if they feed off adversity rather than fear it. Zalex finally looked away. "Why do we fear them?" he muttered, half to himself. The scientist's voice was solemn. "Because we misjudged them, Commander. We assumed they were simply latecomers, but in reality, they have been preparing for conflict far longer than we've existed. They understand pain, loss, sacrifice, all as part of their existence." Yarok's laughter sliced through the tension, forced and grating. So they endured hardship. They're only organic beings, bound by their flesh. What can they do against fleets, shields, planets guarded by the Concord? The scientist didn't answer directly, but his gaze was steady. They may surprise us. For millennia, we have prided ourselves on peace, diplomacy, and avoidance of war. But these humans, they perfected conflict. They know how to strategize, to fight for survival in ways we abandoned long ago. The council members sat silent, each absorbed in the uncomfortable truth unveiled before them. Humanity, the species they had considered naive, inferior, backward, had evolved from a history soaked in blood, loss, and tenacity. Are we preparing for war? Salvax's voice was barely audible, but every word echoed in the stillness of the council chamber. The scientist paused, reluctant. It's not yet confirmed, Commander, but our analysts have detected increased military activities around human-controlled space. They've fortified their planetary defenses and seem to be mobilizing their fleets. Nothing outwardly aggressive, but their movements suggest preparation. Yarok scoffed, his scales rippling with disdain. They can prepare all they want. Primitive technology, limited resources, and their largest ships are dwarfed by our cruisers. Let them fortify. It will only delay the inevitable. These, the scientist began, are historical records of human warfare. Notice how, each century, their tactics evolved, adapted. They faced threats beyond their technology's limits, but managed to turn these limitations into advantages. traps, ambushes, calculated risks. Humans learn to strike from behind, using every weakness in their enemy's defenses. They made war an art. One representative from the Orlath representative, a blue-skinned creature with webbed hands, raised a question. But they have limits, do they not? We have analyzed their biology. They are vulnerable, restricted by their physical forms. Their fleets are few, and their bodies are weak by comparison to ours. The scientist nodded. Yes, they are limited physically, but they have a particular resolve. The concept may seem foreign to us, but they have been conditioned over centuries to face obstacles they are not suited for. They call it adaptation. While other species avoid unfavorable conditions, humans actively confront them, even seeking out challenges for their own growth. ZVX bristled. What are you implying? The scientist's voice dropped to a grave tone. That for humans, weakness is not a deterrent. They thrive on it. They have developed an instinct to overcome, not in spite of adversity, but because of it. Yarok chuckled darkly. You're making them sound invincible. They are still contained by their own shortcomings, aren't they? The scientist looked back at him, an unreadable expression in his eyes. Perhaps. But it is precisely their drive to overcome that makes them unpredictable. You see, they have a saying, the best weapon against an enemy is a mind willing to win at any cost. And from what we've gathered, they take this idea to heart. The room went silent, the council members visibly unnerved. Zalak, trying to restore some sense of authority, clenched his fists and sat up straight. So, what do you recommend then? If they are as capable as you say, what course of action should the Concord take? The scientist considered this, then answered slowly, choosing his words carefully. Isolation may no longer be feasible. We must assess if negotiation could de-escalate their suspicions. However, if humanity's past is any indication, they will not be easily persuaded by words alone. They value actions, demonstrations of strength. Anything less may be seen as weakness, an invitation to resist. Zalak's claws dug into the table. The truth of it was undeniable. As much as he wanted to reject it, humans valued strength and resilience. They seemed almost defiant, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Yarok, undeterred, let out a harsh laugh. You're suggesting we appease them, that we should fear their small ragtag fleet and their primitive defenses? The scientist tilted his head, looking past Yarok with a quiet, unwavering gaze. I am suggesting we consider the cost of underestimating them. We assumed they were a peaceful species. We assumed they would not retaliate. We assumed. He trailed off, letting the weight of their collective mistake settle over the room. Another hologram activated, showing recent surveillance images of humans training in a desolate, harsh environment. They wore minimal protective gear, exposing themselves to the elements, running drills under scorching heat and freezing winds. In any other species, such conditions would be considered inhumane. The Orlath representative's blue skin grew pale. This is how they train their soldiers. Yes, the scientist replied, and not only soldiers, civilians too. They call it preparation. Humanity has entire cultures, entire traditions dedicated to survival under the most extreme conditions. Their warriors are not bred. They are chosen from among their people and shaped through trials. Yarok's scaly hide shifted, unable to mask his discomfort. But why would they do this? Surely there are easier ways to train. The scientist gave a small, resigned smile. They believe in a concept we have long abandoned. To them, hardship is the only way to guarantee strength. Their history shows that they have endured plagues, famine, natural disasters, wars, and they have always found a way to emerge stronger. ZVX looked around the table. Then how do we proceed? We cannot simply wait and see. The scientist's gaze shifted, looking from one face to another. We must show them we are willing to negotiate, to acknowledge their strength and offer respect. Anything else risks igniting the very conflict we fear. Zalak's grip on the table tightened. The idea of showing respect to humanity seemed absurd, but the evidence was clear. Humanity had adapted, survived, and evolved under conditions that would have destroyed any other species. And they had done so in silence, hidden from the galaxy's gaze. Yarok leaned back, crossing his arms defiantly. Then let them come if they wish. I, for one, do not fear humans. They may have their so-called resilience, but against our weapons, our fleets, they stand no chance. Salvax, for the first time, wasn't so sure. He looked at the hologram, the images of humans enduring, fighting, adapting, and something in his chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't experienced in his long career. It was a quiet, nagging uncertainty, the kind that made his scales prickle. The scientist closed the holograms, leaving the council in darkness. "The choice is yours," he said softly. "But know this. If we treat humanity as a mere nuisance, a lower species unworthy of respect, they will notice and they will remember. And history suggests that they will not forgive." With that, he left the council chamber, his footsteps echoing as he disappeared down the corridor, leaving a room full of uneasy leaders to contemplate the warning. As Vax glanced at his fellow council members, he could see the doubt creeping into their faces as well. They had misjudged humanity, misread their strength, and, if they were not careful, the Concord might soon face a reckoning unlike any it had seen before. Zvax couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding that had settled in his bones since the scientist's warning. The rest of the council brushed off the concerns, each more eager than the next to dismiss humanity as a minor nuisance. Yarok, in particular, had been vocal in his disdain, insisting the Concord should teach the humans a lesson if they grew too ambitious. But Zvax had spent enough time in command to recognize the difference between arrogance and caution, and right now the Concord had too much of the former and none of the latter. Weeks passed, and Zalva ordered covert observations of human activity. Reports streamed in, humans conducting relentless drills in the harshest environments, their ships moving with calculated purpose, their communications encrypted and tight-lipped. The humans weren't simply organizing, they were preparing for something on a scale far beyond what the Concord had anticipated. Yarok was the first to scoff. Let them try. Our fleet will crush them in a matter of hours. But Zalva was no longer sure. Have we sent a message, attempted communication? He asked, his voice more tense than he'd intended. The communications officer shook his head. We've sent standard Concord greetings, but there's been no response. Yarok snarled. Fine, if they won't answer, then we'll meet them with firepower. Wait, Zvax ordered, his voice cutting through the clamor. This isn't a battle we can win by charging in blindly. If they're truly here for war, we need a strategy, Yarok growled. What strategy could we possibly need against primitive vessels? They may have more ships, but they don't have the weapons to match ours. The council members nodded, but Zvax sensed the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Ignoring the warnings was no longer an option, and the humans, those sleeping dragons, had chosen now to awaken. He turned to the tactical map, studying the position of the human fleet. They've spread their forces into tight clusters, each one covering the other. They're prepared for our formations, he muttered to himself. They know us. The human approach was meticulous, controlled, unlike any of the Concord's enemies. And then, as if on cue, the human flagship began broadcasting. This is Commander Vasquez of the United Earth Fleet. Concord, your treatment of humanity as a lesser species ends today. We come not as aggressors, but as equals. Stand down and we will discuss terms." Yarok laughed, the harsh sound grating on everyone's nerves. "How dare they? Equals. They have no idea what power they're challenging." But Zalva felt a surge of something he hadn't experienced in years: respect. Commander Vasquez's words had been delivered with restraint, despite the human fleet's formidable stance. "Open a line," Zalva ordered, ignoring Yarok's protest. "This is Commander Zalva of the Concord Council. Commander Vasquez, you have entered Concord territory uninvited. This act is provocative." Vasquez's voice remained steady. "Provocative. Commander, you forced humanity into a corner for centuries, stifled our development and kept us confined. You monitored us, assigned us menial roles, and kept us isolated. And yet, we rose, we endured, and now we are here, not to conquer, but to claim our rightful place in this galaxy." The council shifted uncomfortably under Vasquez's sharp words. Zvax struggled to maintain a diplomatic tone. "Your grievances are noted, Commander. But understand, your fleet is vastly outgunned. Do not mistake your readiness for invincibility." "Perhaps," Vasquez replied coolly. "But history shows that humanity doesn't need invincibility. We only need purpose. You should have seen that from the beginning." Yilo's patience finally snapped. "Enough of this," he roared. "Arm the weapons. We will show them their place." As Concord ships surged forward, Zvax felt a pang of regret. Humanity had offered peace, a path forward as equals, but the Council had chosen war, blinded by centuries of dismissing humans as inferior. The first blast erupted in the void, Concord lasers cutting through the blackness toward the human fleet. The humans maneuvered with breathtaking precision, weaving through the fire with agility no one had anticipated. They struck back, targeting weak points in the Concord's formation, moving as a single cohesive force. It wasn't long before the conquered fleet, superior in firepower, began to falter. Each hit from the human ships was calculated, each strike a carefully planned tactic. For every conquered ship that fired, 2 human vessels retaliated with strategic precision, exploiting the Concord's rigidity and reliance on brute strength. Zvax watched in horror as the conquered fleet, once thought invincible, fell one by one. The humans fought as if each ship, each life, held unbreakable purpose. He'd never seen anything like it, an army not just of warriors, but of beings who understood both battle and sacrifice on a level that defied his understanding. Finally, Yarok's flagship exploded, consumed by a targeted strike on its reactor core. The council chamber gasped as the fireball filled the screen. Zvax felt a strange, hollow relief. Humanity had offered peace, and the council had rejected it in arrogance. Zalva took a steadying breath, activating his comm. "Commander Vasquez, you have proven your point. Humanity's strength, its resolve, is undeniable. On behalf of the Concord, I propose a ceasefire." There was a pause before Vasquez responded. "We came here for equality, Commander Zvax. Do you understand now what that means?" "Yes," Zvax replied solemnly. "Humanity has earned its place among us. Let us begin anew, not as conquerors or subordinates, but as allies."